Welcome to Earthmote. I'm Randy. Today I have an adventure module review for you. Today we're going to be looking at the Scourge of the Northland, a new adventure module by Jacob Fleming. Jacob Fleming has done a couple of other popular OSR modules in recent years, including In the Shadow of Tower Silveraxe and Through the Valley of the Manticore. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Scourge of the Northland to see if it is worth your while in picking up. So let's go ahead and dive into it. Okay, so here we have the cover of the Scourge of the Northland, the module by Jacob Fleming. Here you can see the cover illustration. It is done by Jacob Fleming himself. A couple of adventures hiding from a moving orc warband. So very cool. It is a low-level adventure for 3 or more players. Doesn't specify levels, but looking at it, it's probably levels 1 to up to 5 if you can get enough treasure to get to that level. On the back, it's a simple cover on the back, just again reiterating the title and giving sort of a little bit of flavor text on what is in the module. So flipping back to the front, we have the front kind of interior cover is this hex map of this sort of, with a sort of topographical perspective to it. And these topographical hex maps are something that Jacob has really become known for. There's one in the Shadow of Tower Silveraxe, and there's one in Through the Valley of the Manticore, and people really like them, and there's sort of this unique aspect to Jacob's modules. So this sandbox that he kind of sets up takes place in more of a plains type environment, along with some different hills and mountains that kind of flank and surround the different valleys that is in play here. The main city that is described is Obanhold down at the bottom, and then there are a few different adventuring sites that are pre-populated by Jacob. And there's a couple of different bodies of water as well. So very cool. As we can see, the Scourge of the Northland is written by Jacob Fleming, illustrated by him too, as we'll see throughout the module. There's lots of cool different black and white illustrations that really harken back to that old school style of play, but have sort of a modern twist that Jacob puts on them. And it is edited by David Cameron. The Gelatinous Cubism Press is Jacob's publishing company. So here you can see a full page illustration done by Jacob himself. Very cool. A couple of orcs riding out on their horses. Here we have the table of contents that sort of gives the background of the sandbox, and then the different locations that are pre-populated in the hex map that is seen on the first page. It starts off with a little bit of a prologue. Then we can see the kind of introduction to the setting. He talks about how it's sort of a classic fantasy setting, similar to Greyhawk, and kind of gives those sort of old school vibes in that regard. To give kind of a summary of what's going on in the sandbox, essentially there are these different orange crystals that were left behind by the mysterious builders, and they are used to sort of power different arcane workings and magical technology, essentially. And as the humans entered into the area, they discovered those crystals, and they've been using them to kind of further their expansion and grow into regions that otherwise could not support growth. And so it talks a little bit about who is in charge. And then, of course, as the humans and demi-humans have pushed into this area, that is sort of encroaching on the orcs and sort of their sort of previous claim to the lands. And then also the orange crystals seem to be drawing the attraction of some large spiders that continue to besiege the city walls. Here we have the kind of description of the city of Obanhold. There are several different districts. Each district is described on its own kind of two-page spread, which is very nice. It starts off with the Old Ward or the Noble District and kind of describes the different points of interest in this district of Obanhold. Then you get the Temple District, the Northern District, Central East Commerce District, known as Iron Hall, Mudholm. And one kind of criticism I have of the city itself is it describes a lot of different points of interest, but they don't really give a lot of interesting hooks. Like, for example, Bull's Bakery, it talks about a bake shop, and their specialty are in these raisin spice sweet cakes, which are a local favorite. However, to me and my group, that's not really actionable information. It's just kind of filling up space. So I wish that maybe there were a few more hooks set into the points of interest that he decided to describe. But I understand that maybe some groups will use that information and play off it from there. Here we have outside the wall, so you can see the city all in one piece, and then there are a few different points of interest outside as well. And then there's beneath Obanhold. Next, we have a section on the Orcs of Maut'Hgar. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Jacob is kind enough to give us a pronunciation section there. The orcs really revolve around sort of these three nomadic tribes that have sort of a singular spiritual leader. And it kind of talks about their history a bit, and a lot of their religion and structure, societal structure, revolve around these three moons, Balinus, Vranga, and Aida. Hopefully I'm pronouncing those right. And it talks a little bit about how the original siblings were related to that, and then kind of walks through the history and the culture. Three Moons is a harken back to the module in the Shadow of Tower Silver Axe. That is, the builders and the three moons are kind of common theme in that module as well. So NPCs, the major orc NPCs, you can see that they're the different elders of the moons. And then there's kind of this central prophet that is sort of the spiritual leader of all the three different tribes. And sort of they kind of listen to them and what sort of different prophecies they foretell. A little bit on the geography of the Maut'Hgar. From there, Jacob talks a bit about the Northland travel, different encounters that you could come across in the wilderness. Always nice to have an encounter table. Perhaps you are going to get into mass combat using the running into different orc warbands. That might be a situation where your players begin to develop small militias or armies of their own, and he gives a sort of simple resolution on how to do mass combat. On the next page, we have sort of a simple summary of the different keyed areas on the hex map, and nicely Jacob provides the different hexes. So K18 is where Gatton is located. Very nice by Jacob to provide that. Gives you sort of an easy reference to look up those different locations on the map should you need to. From there, he dives into the different keyed locations he has put on the map, starting with the Eastern Mine. We can again see that's in D16. He does a nice job of keeping all the information on a 2-page spread. So this first level here has 8 rooms, and all 8 are keyed on this 2-page. So it's very easy to reference what Jacob has populated the rooms with versus the key. So that's great. And then also he sets up a small wandering monster table there as well. He does talk about sort of what's in the locations, and if there's any treasure in there. A lot of his descriptions are kind of bare bones. There's not a lot of like context or interesting setup. In some cases, there are like 2 traders are attempting to open the door on the east wall, which is great. But in other ones, it'll just be, 2 spiders in the room, and you have to kind of figure out what to do with that. Level 2 of the Eastern Mine. So again, the second level gets its own 2-page spread. Very nice, very easy to reference. And of course, if you have to go backwards, you're only 1 page away. So that is super easy to reference while you're at the table. One thing that is cool about his different keyed smaller dungeons is they do have sort of these magical portals, and if your players figure out sort of how those work, then they can activate the portal and they can travel to the Rotofine ruins. And a lot of the different keyed locations all have portals going to this one spot, the Rotofine ruins. So that's kind of a fun little interactive portion where your players can start in one spot and end up totally across the map. As you can see here, the ruins are in an island in the middle of the lake, whereas all the other keyed locations can be anywhere. So the Eastern Mine, for example, the one we're looking at, is there. So you can teleport a long ways away. Always fun for the players to figure out where they've wound up and how the heck they are going to get back. Next, we have the Spring Cavern, a small area occupied by some bandits who have kind of occupied the upper level and the different treasures that they have. The second level is the Spring Cavern, and this is a more natural cavernous area that is occupied by a giant water serpent. If the players are brave enough, they can tread into the waters, and should they find kind of the secret area in Area 11, they get access to the Helm of the Spring Serpent, which lets them command the serpent or command a nearby reptile. So very cool, kind of thematic, interactive bit. Next, we have the Overlook Ruins, another area kind of occupied by Thieves Guild agents. They stash different treasures here that the players can kind of delve around and try to uncover. Forest Ruins, I think, are overrun by spiders. That contains different treasures for the players to explore. Throughout the different ruins and dungeons, there are chunks of orange crystal, and that is the crystal that is kind of driving a lot of the underlying conflict in the sandbox, and the players themselves can get their hands on it, and it is often valuable. It opens up some of those portals to get to that Rotofine ruins and has different other uses. And the crystal itself is actually a magical item described in the back in these crystals of power, and it is sort of a corrupting force. So the longer your players are exposed to it, the more corrupted they get, and there are different kind of burdens that Jacob describes here, starting with they want to stay close to the crystal, and separating them oneself from it requires a save versus spells, all the way to the point where the crystal's hold on the player is permanent and the player character is lost and fully controlled by the referee, sort of becoming a servant of the chaos. Going back to the forest ruins, there is a level below the ruins themselves, and the forest ruins has a second level as well that goes deeper. There's some nice, Jacob does a really nice job with having kind of different looping in his dungeons, so you can go from different hallways, lead to different paths, and they can kind of backtrack on one another. In this case, there is a couple of shafts that lead from the first floor all the way down to level 2, or the level 1 down to level 2 as well. So kind of nice vertical traveling beyond just using these standard stairways. Of course, the one thing I will say on Jacob's dungeons is, they tend to be on the smaller side, so there are rarely multiple egresses from kind of the outside world into the dungeon. Generally, they have a singular entrance, not all of them, but generally, yeah, there's kind of one main egress into the dungeon itself. Raider's Stronghold, so again, just kind of one central egress there, but it does go lower. So this is a stronghold held by the orcs that are preparing for war. If you fall for these traps here, you can find yourself in the holding cells there. Always a bad spot to be, and once they're collected there, the orcs will move the different prisoners into this section here in 14, where their kind of fate is determined by the central warden of the orcs. In most cases, the warden decides that they are just fodder for the pitworm in area 15. And the stats for the pitworm are quite nasty, probably not something low-level players can defeat. Lastly, we have those ruins describe themselves. So this is the place where all of the other interactive portals lead to, the ruins on the island. Spider Queen Lair. So of course the spiders are in a central opponent in the sandbox. The spiders continue to besiege Obanhold itself. Where are they coming from? Well, the Spider Queen's lair. And she has, burrs a lot of different of these giant spiders that come out. Should the players get strong enough, they can decide to head there and cut the problem off at its head. Getting into level 2 here, you have the Spider Queen herself in chamber number 5, along with her clutches of eggs. The Spider Queen herself is quite nasty, an 8 hit die creature with a pretty strong bite and the poison that will kill the players in 2 rounds. Abandoned Tower is a tower. There are quite a few different towers described within the setting by Jacob. This one has been overrun. A troll occupies the area now. There's a ruined village associated with one of the gods of the moon. Lastly, the kind of other main antagonist or sort of big creature in the module is this wyvern. The wyvern is known as Tovanks. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, but that you can see it right there. And it lives kind of in the mountainside, and most people, the orcs and the humans, try to avoid it at all costs because it's quite nasty. But of course, as players, they can try to head up the mountainside and take the wyvern head on within its own lair. Itself has a little bit of a misprint discrepancy. On the key itself here, it's listed as a 7 hit die creature with an attack bonus of +6. But if you look at the back kind of appendix, it's listed as a 9 hit die creature with an attack bonus of 5. So you have to look at your OSC manual to figure out the correct stats, which is a little bit annoying, and maybe ask Jacob which one it's actually meant to be. Is it meant to be a 9 hit die creature or a 7 hit die, and then reference accordingly. The wyvern itself sleeps on a flying carpet, which is very cool if you can get a hold of it. At the end here, we have that bestiary appendix. So you have the giant spiders, the giant spider queen, the water serpent, the pitworm, which is a 15 hit die creature, and the wyvern Tovanks himself. There are magic items and handouts on the back. So the cloak of the brother, crystals of power, the sword of the sister, and then lastly a few different maps and props that can come up throughout the course of the game. So there's a tattoo map on a corpse, which is kind of cool, leads to a chest. The warden's map itself, a couple of different messages, and a printed out message there. And then lastly, the final page and the dungeon key at the back are just sort of keys to read the maps and the hex numbers. Lastly, we have the map in a larger printout format. I will turn it in a second so it can get in screen, but just on vertical landscape. So here you can see it. It's the same one as in the front of the module, located there. Just a nice bigger version of it to reference and look at. So there it is in all of its glory. So Overall, it looks like a fun product. I would say that my main criticisms on it are kind of around the fluff in the description of the Obanhold town itself. Some of those to me were just a little bit unnecessary. And then I think as a product, there aren't a lot of hooks or rumors that just kind of seed the adventure for the players to go out and explore the different areas. That would have been nice to have maybe like a rumor table so the players could have some different starting points to go off of. As it is, it's really left up to the GM to kind of develop that. And then lastly, I think, there's a lot of great keyed areas here, but there's no real motivation or a lot of description on what the different characters are doing in them. That would be something that would be nice to have a little bit more idea around the motivation of the thieves or the orcs up north, and stuff like that. So I think that's a little bit of homework for the GM. If you want to really get the most out of the setting, you're probably going to have to think about that ahead of time, just so you can kind of have it ready for when your players interact with the different areas, just to make it a little bit more dynamic and interesting. But overall, Jacob does a great job of providing that kind of setting canvas for you to go ahead and build off of and flesh out a bit. And for $17, I think it's worth a try. It's even cheaper if you get the PDF only option. I will leave links in the description below to the different places where you could pick up the product. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, as it helps out my new channel get seen by more people. And if you'd like to see more reviews or videos about role-playing games in the future, consider subscribing. And that is it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.